Hi everyone, this is part two of the Dunes Honor, and so we're going to watch two videos about dunes and plants or animals that live in the dunes. We're going to see these two video links are from the requirements which I found in the internet. So I got these two videos from their links. So let's watch them and then uh, I will give. I've taken 12. Do you have to do in 12? You have to do 12. You have to do two requirements to complete the 12th requirement. So I've chosen this and another one, which I'll be doing just after we see the videos. So let's watch the videos. Uh,
Well, this is a beautiful beach here, completely devoid of people, absolutely gorgeous, very nice, well-developed primary dune dominated by this beach grass, and I'm curious to see what's on the other side of this dune. It might prove it to be interesting. Where I am now is between the primary dune and the secondary dune on Kauri Beach. And this is a dune slack or a swale. It's a low area, a depression, where the water table comes much closer to the soil surface. So the plants that you see behind me, these plants are actually adapted to a higher water table and some inundation. So you see some very typical marsh plants here. If you look at the soil, what you see is as you're moving into the lowest areas of the swale, it's first very light colored. So the sand on the surface is quite dry, as you see here. But then as we move into the swale proper, the elevation decreases because the sand has been blown away. The water table is closer to the soil, and this is where we pick up the plants that are adapted to more flooded conditions. And now if we look at the soil, what you see, the soil is black. So as you see, the soil here is very moist. It not only contains sand, but it has a lot of organic matter as well from the plant production of leaves and roots that accumulate over time after they die. So this is a completely different habitat than the dune habitat. And so the species are completely different. We have this plant, which is a species of paspalum, which is a flood-tolerant grass. That's found here and it dominates the area. We also have this sedge, which is very common as well in more flooded areas. These plants are not found on the dune. They're only found back here in these low areas, these more moist conditions.
Common to wet habitats develop. So a deflation plain is a wind source area in a dune field where plants common to wet habitats develop. There are different types of plains also.
we've got is this between the secondary dune and the tertiary dune. There's a huge deflation plane, and it looks like it's
So this is the secondary dune and this is the tertiary dune, and there's a huge deflation plane here.
it's a place where some salt water may enter. Maybe the water table is down deep enough rather, that there is some saltwater intrusion. But we'll take a look at these plants and see if they're freshwater or brackish marsh types of species. This is a tidal channel that probably enters the beach at some point down here. And so it's bringing in salt water in between this dune field, this secondary and this tertiary dune. There is salt marsh vegetation growing on the sides of this tidal channel.
Behind the dunes at so let's take this one.
We're at the start of Trail 3 at Indiana Dunes State Park in Chesterton, Indiana, to learn a little bit about the plants that are found on the dunes. It's a really interesting ecosystem. And to help us learn about that, we're with Brad Baumgartner, who is the interpretive naturalist here. How are you?
I'm doing great.
It is a great sunny summer day, perfect day to explore the dunes.
It's a great day to be out here, and literally is what is the birthplace of ecology right here.
That's true. That's a really good point. And so we're going to kind of hike up Trail 3, and we're going to talk about some of the plants that are found in the dunes. And it'll kind of be like a little walk through succession, right?
Yeah, we'll actually be walking through kind of an ecologic time. You know, we're looking at here, this birthplace. This is a place where over 100 years ago, a lot of scientists have been studying the plant life as you move away from Lake Michigan. That's right here by us. And as you move through there, the changes through time, you get different plant species, more than any other place in this region.
Ah, interesting. Okay, yeah, it is a very biodiverse region. That's a really good point. Now, we're standing right here by sand, right at the edge of the parking lot, and right away, I see this grassy stuff.
Yeah, right at the start of Trail 3. We're here near the beach. We're in the 4 dunes. We got the first signs of life.
Yeah.
And down here is the first kind of stabilizer of these sand dunes. And we call it marram grass. I mean, some people may call it dune grass.
Yep.
And this marram grass, what we see here is only a fraction of the plant. There are lots of feet of roots that are going down here that help kind of hold and stabilize that dune, and their own decomposition creates soil for the next stages of plants that come through here.
Okay.
And so the marram grass is the first stage that we see here in the Indiana dunes as that sand starts to blow 7 miles an hour. Is what it takes for a little sand grain like this to blow here and create the first dune, and this marram grass comes in and stabilizes it and starts the whole process.
And one of the things that I noticed right away as we kind of make our way over to the trailhead is that there is a set of stairs, so visitors are always encouraged to stay on the trail, on the steps, so as not to trample plants like marram grass.
Absolutely. Yeah, these sand dunes are a real fragile environment, and so these grasses here have been growing for decades to stabilize this. It only takes a couple people walking through some area they don't need to be, and quickly you'll trample this down, and you'll set back that succession all over again. And so it's always best stay on the trail, stay on the boardwalk, stay on the stairs when we got them there for you.
Okay, so how about if we head up? And I noticed as we kind of walked by, you were talking about that deep root system of the marram grass, and you can actually really see it here, kind of on the edge.
Yeah, right on the edge of our parking lot. You can see these roots that are coming in through here. You can see the different color in the sand as well, and how it's really holding on to that sand dune to keep it there. And then other plants now are coming in to help in that process as well.
Okay. All right, well, let's head up the trail. This is a pretty steep climb.
It's a good dune.
It's a good little dune. I'm starting to see some trees and shrubs in here, Brad.
Yes, we're starting to see some stages of succession The soil is provided for different plants. Now as we start to move further away from the lake and go up the dune.
Uh-huh. And
You're
so
holding one right there, yeah.
Yeah, what is this evergreen?
And pretty unique to the Indiana Dunes and habitats farther north is the jack pine tree.
Okay.
And it's one of those trees that will set its roots in the sand, can grow in that real sandy soil, and does pretty well in our four-dune habitats.
Okay. Another kind of pioneering species, so to speak.
Another pioneer species. Also one of those that's adapted to fire.
Right.
And the cones actually require a prescribed fire or a wildfire to release the seeds back into the soil to start the process over again.
Okay. And of course, as you mentioned, the jack pines wouldn't be here without the hard work of the marram grass. Some of those really
Setting
early
in the
species.
nutrients back into the soil, and then that provides for the jack pine, which will then add its own nutrients to the soil and provide for future plants as we continue onward.
Okay, well, let's see what else we can find up here. You know, I'm seeing here in this hot sunny spot some poison ivy.
Yep, definitely all hikers want to be aware of that.
Yep.
Even in these dry, sandy areas, we're going to have poison ivy.
Okay, grows everywhere, doesn't it?
Yep, leaves
All
of three there, and a little reddish stem. Good
Yep,
thing to look at.
Red in the center there. Okay, all right, well, let's keep going up the stairs. And here's another tree, Brad, which is distinctive for the dunes. What are we looking at?
Absolutely, yeah, we're looking at the cottonwoods, and the cottonwoods are kind of a four-dune pioneer plant as well, and because they are amazingly adaptable to the sand. In fact, what we're seeing here is you look at this trunk on this cottonwood, and as it's growing, it can actually sense whether it's being buried. And if it's been being buried, the actual branches can shoot out and become roots.
Oh, wow.
And then the same token, as the sand blows away from it, then it can sense that, and it can change those roots and the branches and then into bark as well.
Oh,
so this thing can survive the ever-changing environment that it faces up here when you're this close to the lake.
Okay.
So it's a really neat four-dune colonizer, the cottonwood tree.
And of course, kind of heart-shaped leaves,
Yep,
which are
heart-shaped or
nice.
triangle with the large teeth on it, helps identify it.
Yeah.
And it's got a flat stem.
It does.
And this flat stem kind of gives it a little wiggly look there as each
it
of the
flutters.
leaves individually shakes in the tree.
Yeah, very pretty. And of course, they get to be larger trees.
Much larger,
There's
as they continue to
several
grow.
around here.
Fast-growing species, perfect for our four-dune environments.
Okay, you got one more plant
Yeah,
to
let's
show
go
us?
farther.
Brad, this is a beautiful spot. You can really get a good sense of the space up here in the rolling dunes. It's really
Yeah, we
pretty.
moved back from the lake here. We're starting to get more of the open prairie.
Right.
You head a little farther south, it'll succeed into savanna forest and then even to the bottomland forest. But right now, yeah, we're up here in the prairie, some different plants that we have here.
And here's one that I think people are surprised to find in
right here.
Indiana, right?
Yeah, right down here, most people don't realize that we have cactus.
It's native.
In Indiana, it's prickly pear cactus.
Yeah.
One of 8 subspecies in the U.S. that we have growing. And right here in the dunes, and this is a sandy, desert-like environment.
Sure.
So our prickly pear cactus to survive, what it has is its root system does not go down deep, but it's really shallow and spreads out, so it can collect a lot of the rain that may fall in here to be able to survive. And then we see right here on the ends, here we're done flowering, we're starting to produce the fruits, or the tunas.
Sure.
And come back in September, and you can actually come out here and eat these. And they kind of taste kind of like a watermelon.
Yeah, it's
a lot of
sweet.
seeds to them.
Yeah, a little sweet.
So it's kind of neat. And we have different spines and what we call the glockids that are on there that we see on our prickly pear cactus. And we got even more here behind us.
It's a really,
so
really
all
unique
throughout this
plant.
sandy prairie, we have a lot of prickly pear cactus you can find that most people don't realize is here in the dunes.
Right, and of course a few other plants typical of that are native up here. You've got some wormwood. I see.
Wormwood, yep. We got more marram grass, of course.
Marram grass
it's
up here.
stabilized up here.
Right.
With some of our bouncing bed or soapboard that's in here.
And there's some milkweed.
Saw some milkweed as well. And of course we're surrounded too, scattered throughout here is cottonwood that we saw earlier as well.
Exactly. All right. Well, you know, it's certainly a great place to explore. If folks have never visited a dune environment, Indiana Dunes State Park is a great place to start. Visit you at the Nature Center and
It's a place to be.
partake of some of your programs. And so we'll have a link on the Outdoor Elements website that are used in wetlands.
In partnership with the
Okay, so that was dune formation in the US. So I just got a great idea. Why don't we see the dune plants and the dune animals in the desert region? So let's go to YouTube. Let's see. Check that music. Wait. Okay, information. See, dune desert. Dunes. Okay, this one.
Students with ADHD save 10 hours studying with this Chrome extension. But no, by all
Greetings and welcome to yet another episode of a crankcase of a band that doesn't. Now, as you can see,
18 minutes. Let's see something nice. Dune desert plants. Okay, that's interesting. There's different stuff. It's, let's just go through this.
Shelter and water. Adaptability is the key to life and death in the dunes.
I will link this video. I think all of us can watch this because it's about 46 minutes. I'm not going to record it. So there are a lot of stuff that is there, which is in Saudi Arabia, which is in our region. So I think all of us can watch this and it'll be nice to watch it. I think it's a wildlife documentary channel, so it'll be good to watch, right? Okay, so I found that out. I'll be sharing the link with this video and the other two videos also I'll be sharing. So let's get back to the presentation. That was watching a video and about plants and animals that live in dunes. So I didn't have that review one ready. Please bear with me. So the next question, just give me a minute. Let me present this in share. Give me a minute. Let me present it in present. Okay. Okay. So that was 12C, and the next one is talk to a group or write about or make a short video about a real-life dune conservation project. Explain why its specific habitat should be saved. Example, the endangered species, the plants or the animals living there. So I'm going to talk to you guys about something. So a healthy dune plant community, I'm going to talk about plants and I'm going to talk about dune restoration, almost like a dune conservation project. It's also known as dune restoration project. So a healthy dune plant community is composed of a mixture of native grasses, forbs, subshrubs, and other living plants. Dune restoration efforts have been proven that these native species will recognize degraded dunes by removing non-native species and restoring essential dune processes. So today I'm talking about dune conservation, more like dune restoration. So, introduction. I'm going to be talking about the Lamphere Dunes. The Refuge Lamphere's Dune Unit is a home to the first dune restoration project on the West Coast. Restoration began in the 1980s with the early experiments to control invasive European beach grass, which is known as the Ammophila arenea. By the early 1990s, the Nature Conservancy, the past owner, began a large-scale mechanical eradication project that took about 6 years to complete. This project became a template project throughout the West Coast and beyond. Most importantly, it demonstrated that by removing over stabilizing beach grass and other invasive plants, essential dune processes were restored, fostering the recovery of the ecosystem. Fostering the recovery of the ecosystem. Okay. Since that time, the restoration has continued to evolve and expand. On our local dunes, over 7 miles of coastlines have been restored in Del Norte counties, and plants are there that works to be more than double than this number was there before. What is restoration and why is it needed? We define restoration as a holistic process that results in the return of a compressed ecosystem to one that supports not just the individual parts, for example, the native plants and the plants, but also the underlying process that sustains them. These processes can be both biological, for example, mutualism, food webs, or succession, or abiotic, such as hydrology in dunes, importantly, the sand movement. Many years of research have confirmed that the plant and animal communities found in our local dunes are dependent on a finely tuned equilibrium between sand movement and stability. Our dune communities require repeated disturbance to maintain the patchwork of successional stages that result in very high level of diversity. These agents of disturbance take many forms, including wind, causing both erosion and deposition, salt spray, wave erosion, animal burrowing, and herbivory. When these processes are curtailed by human activities, such as introduction of invasive species, changes of the cascades throughout the system, resulting in the loss of diversity at all levels. The picture on the left was taken prior to this restoration efforts and clearly shows a dense monoculture of the European beach grass. The picture on the right was taken from the same location after successful restoration efforts, which returned this dune to a more natural condition. How were our dunes degraded? At Hummel Bay National Wildlife Refuge, they were fortunate to have acquired a relatively intact dune system, the Lamfair Dunes, which had been under the stewardship of the former landowner William and Hortense Lamfair, who sought to minimize this kind of extensive erosion of vegetated dunes seen elsewhere during the heyday of unregulated of highway vehicle use. In addition to this, the invasion of highly disrupted species, yellow bush Louvain arpiers, forming the adjacent property to the north where it had been planted in the 1960s, was minimized by the early efforts of the late John Sawyer, the professor of the botany at Humboldt State University. He found that the annual lupine bash, with the help of the local chapter of the California Native Plant Society, which was founded in 1978. When the Lamfair dunes passed into the lands of the TNC in 1974, the most significant threats beside the vehicle trespass was the European beach grass, which had made incursions on both property from both the north and the south. Since that time, Humboldt County instituted the OHB ordinance and vehicle trespass is no longer a threat to the dunes. At the same time, The TNC and later FWS added properties to the south and later FES added properties to the south, now the Malgil Dunes, that had been more severely degraded and require additional restoration. The Naal Dunes had a fore-dune completely overtaken by European beach grass, and in the dune ridges between the fore-dune, beach grass was joined by yellow bush lupine and ice plant Carpus sam. The yellow bush lupine causes severe impacts to the dune community because it elevates soil fertility to the point where native species had to be adapted to grow fertile levels that cannot compete. And this facilitates the secondary invasions by invasive annual grasses. So even the grass that grows on dunes has to be controlled so that the dune formation stays. So now we're coming to the restoration methods. Restoration methods. Okay. This picture, the left shows a large crew of harbor laborers preparing for hours for digging to remove the European beach grass. This picture on the right is 6 years later and shows their efforts were not in vain, as the plant community has become a mosaic of native grass and forests. Dunes are by nature a relatively hostile environment characterized by low soil fertility, summer drought, harsh winds, variable but potentially intense of solar radiation, and salt spray. The organisms that live here have adapted to these conditions with many specialized traits. Because of this, restoration necessities this they rest, because of this the restoration necessities have returned to the ecosystem because of these conditions. This process begins with the removal of the overstabilizing vegetation in many cases. So the overstabilization is this. In many cases, that action alone is sufficient to return the system to the point where native species can recolonize and communities can recover relatively unaided. In other cases, such as where the yellow bush lupine has been altered for the soil properties, the more intensive the intervention is needed for such kinds of development. Degraded coastal dunes are particularly suited to mechanical restoration, which mimics the physical restoration. Sorry about that. So, degraded coastal dunes are particularly suited to mechanical restoration, which mimics the physical disturbances that underpins dune processes. Mechanical restoration on our refuge has taken the form of manual removal of European beach grass with shovels or less, commonly with heavy equipment in relatively intact systems with a high degree of native plant cover and associated animal use, which is manual. Removal allows for the very localized impacts that preserve native patches as sources for recolonization of restored areas. This method may require the revegetation and the longer period of management to ensure that dunes don't become overly destabilized. So there's something as overdoing something. So and slow recover of vegetatants to recover. Measuring success. So manual removal requires repeated visits to dig a resprouting of the plants, which has been extensive system of the underground stearns. Plants are plants are killed gradually over within 2 to 3 years, which gives native plants a chance to recolonize at the same time. An important part of the restoration is monitoring the results. Our oldest restoration project in the Landwehr Dunes was carried out almost 20 years ago, and we have continued to monitor the response of the ecosystem, providing an important data that has been used to support continued restoration elsewhere. Although our in-house monitoring has been focused on vegetation, we have sought outside researchers to assess responsible in invertebrate and vertebrate communities. More recently, we began to use our topographic profiles to monitor gemomorphic responses. To date, our efforts have been rewarded with positive results. Plant communities have been shown to respond quickly, moving through different successful stages over time. The earliest restored areas are now indistinguishable from those that were never degraded. A study published by a researcher in San Francisco State University confirmed that the terrestrial arthropod abundance and richness has also been restored. We know from work of students at Humboldt State University that the use of these dunes by small rodents and some bird species, including raptors, is actually enhanced by the European beach grass invasion. And we have seen expected decline in some abnormally high densities of rodents to the level normally associated with these communities. It takes a village to restore a dune. Manual removal requires a repeated, because of the manual removal, it requires a village to restore a dune. Our restoration has been founded by a number of entities, including the US Fish and Wildlife Service, the Nature Conservancy, the California Department of Connections and Rehabilitation, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife, the California State Coastal Conservancy, and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. We have depended heavily on our longtime partners and California Conservation Corps, as well as the generosity of the sheriff's work. The alternative program and the hard work and the muscle of the California Department of the Forest and Fire Prevention crews. But upfront, funding is not enough to ensure the long-term result of the restoration. Our partners, Friends of the Dunes, have been providing and continuing source of volunteers are equally important, and they are the backbone of this community involvement and educating buildings and sustainable public support for our work. So that is my report for the 12C requirement. So that completes all the requirements for this honor. And now coming up to the assignment part, which I will show you in a minute, or else I will do that in part 3. Thank you for listening to me.